Friends, a very, very warm welcome to all of you from your friendly host Ajay Kumar in yet another episode, which is fresh and exciting on Beyond Success Unleash the New video podcast series. Today, I have the privilege, this is the first time actually where I'm actually having a twin brothers who are here with joining me. Hi, Suresh. Hi, Ramesh.
Hi Ajay.
Hi Ajay, great to
Hey,
be on.
extremely excited to have both of you on the podcast. And I don't know when I'll get another opportunity to have twin brothers with me. So I'm fairly excited about that. And just to put some colors and dimensions for our audience over here, I'm sure majority of us would have heard of Patrick and John Collison with Stripe, or George Kurian at NetApps and Thomas Kurian at Google Cloud. Interestingly, Suresh and Ramesh have something in common with them. And this is obviously the looks give it away, which I talked about being twin brothers. But they've been in the technology industry, did extremely well for themselves, extremely successful. If I were to do I was doing a bit of reading Suresh and Ramesh with Thomas and George Kurian. Their hometown happens to be back in Kerala, India, and they're in the Bay Area, doing extremely well for themselves. And same is applicable for both of you. For the audience, Suresh works as an SVP GM at Zebra Technologies, and Ramesh works as the Chief Product Officer at EFT Sure. In addition to that, there are certain other elements which are there common to you, which I believe both of you have played extremely critical role in the organizations you worked in terms of their transformation. On a lighter note, Suresh and Ramesh, I want to let everybody know that in case they're working with the smaller groups and they want their companies to get acquired, they should definitely look forward to hiring you because you have a knack for making that happen, right? So, with that being said and done, Suresh and Ramesh, once again, a very, very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us. And like I said, while I'm extremely excited, I think we'll kick off the discussions. Suresh and Ramesh, both of you will have a lot of commonalities as twins growing up together, and there'll be certain things which you did differently. So maybe we'll kickstart the discussion and we can have maybe Suresh will get started with you. If you were to talk the top few things which you and Ramesh growing together have done similar, and then Ramesh will come to you and talk maybe top few things which you believe you guys have done differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I think growing up, as you can imagine, being a pair of twins with immense rivalry, right? Where if one had one thing, then the other had to have exactly the same thing. Whether it was measures, quantities, it had to be exactly the same, right? So, given that, I mean, you can imagine that growing up, we had very, very, almost identical, kind of interests, almost identical in terms of what we ended up doing and our hobbies. Call it the echo chamber, right? I mean, I think with both of us, if one found some interest, and the other picked it up, and so on. So, what I would say is life up through high school, right, which was pretty much almost identical.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was a point of divergence after that, which I think maybe I'll let Ramesh go through some of that.
Right.
But then fast forward 10 years after high school, we both end up working in the same company. It was at least two different floors in the same building, but even that went away after a year. I think we were on the same floor, maybe three offices down from each other.
Right.
Get acquired by a couple of different companies, end up again at a large publicly owned company in the Bay Area, and then of course again there's a little bit of divergence in our paths from there, but even after that divergence, both of us end up here in the Bay Area, right? Living maybe about 30 miles from each other. So and leading products or businesses at technology companies, in our career. So I think if you chart those kinds of similarities, it's probably 2/3 of our lives. I think it's been we've followed almost if not the same, at least parallel paths.
Thank you, Suresh. So this was all the things which we had similar, apart from those sibling rivalries which are there. Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about what all different things were there. Ramesh?
Yeah. So when Suresh started talking about the rivalries, I thought we were already getting into the divergence. But no, I mean, as Suresh said, I think after high school, our paths definitely diverged for a number of years. Um, I think this also goes back to, I think, definition of success and those sorts of things, which you're going to talk about a bit later. But Suresh obviously ended up going and doing engineering. I actually went off to do architecture, changed my mind, went off to do economics. And, somehow, as Suresh said, we both end up in computer science or software related technology, and in the fields of product management. So I think the lesson for that is when you're 18 or 19 or 20,
Right.
what you do in the next few years is not probably what you're going to be doing later on. So don't stress too much about those things, right? But anyway, so that is, I think, one part. Even in our careers, I think while we were at the same company, I had been at this company in the New York suburbs for a little while, and had the opportunity to do many different roles. Got into sales management for a while, was in operations and those kinds of things. And Suresh obviously did different things there, but those were sort of different experiences. Paths again began to diverge probably 2012 or thereabouts, where Suresh decided to continue staying with the big company that had acquired our businesses, but I wanted to go back and do something a little bit more entrepreneurial. So we ended
Right.
up doing a couple of startups, and here's maybe where the divergence becomes convergence again, because we met three other folks. The five of us ideated a business. We started that business outside of our day jobs. That continued for a while. Unlike Suresh, I actually jumped in, joined that business, while Suresh was sort of on the sidelines, so to speak. That also did get acquired by by a large financial institution. And
Right.
so I found myself back in a big company, just like Suresh is. But I think, as you just said, I've recently decided to make again the switch to something a little more entrepreneurial, the smaller company. And so here we are. So that's on the career side. I think on the personal side, it's sort of a little bit hard to find a lot of differences. We both like music, we both play guitar, we both like have pets. We have two children each. Of course, he's got two daughters. I've got a daughter and a son. But
Right.
so a lot of that, certainly, if it's not the same, has a parallel trajectory.
Got you. Got you. On a lighter note, I see one more difference for both of you, right? Suresh
Yeah.
bears a mustache, and is the reason behind that to make job easier for people like us to recognize between both of you?
I joke, when during the first stint when we worked together, which was, quite a few years, right? I mean, almost 7 or 8 years, I think, right? At that point in time, my joke was to my all the colleagues who worked with us in that office, was that they had to pay me every month to keep this mustache on, because that was the only way they could tell us apart, right? And trust me, Ajay, back then, we were much more identical, right? In the meantime, in the years that have elapsed since then, I have managed to, let's say, pack on a few more pounds than Ramesh has. But leaving that aside, yeah, I mean, it became, it's part of that, with the twins, I guess, right? If I had to explain it, you want to be as different as possible, but I guess that just stuck with me. Then it became a habit, right? I mean, what was there when you're in your early 20s, then kind of just stays on.
No, got you. No, no, this is good stuff. I think Suresh, Ramesh, I'm excited. I'm sure so would the audience be who are going to watch this podcast, to listen to your both point of views from a convergence as well as divergence point of view on success and some of the related associated matters on that. So let's talk about the very one-liner, two-liner definition of success for both of you. Uh, it could range from people with, for someone, it could be like applause and claps in the boardroom for them. For somebody else on the other side, could be good laughter at a dinner table with their family and friends. What is success for you guys?
I mean, I can start. I mean, for me, it has always been about, success is always, I mean, what is a goal, right? I mean, success is always do you define any kind of success is always about you reach a set of goals that you define for yourself, right? Because my definition of success is probably very different, Ajay, than yours or Ramesh's definition, or anybody else who's listening to this, right? And for me, it's been around that personal fulfillment and happiness. I mean, to me, I mean, that is a definition of success, right? And in that, you could say, having these kinds of strong relationships that we talked about,
Right.
having doing things that you enjoyed, right? And or continue to enjoy doing, having that kind of personal growth, being able to um, uh, you know s- when I talked about strong relationships, that means not just relationships with people at work, but it is also about your family, right? With your spouse, with your children, your
Right.
pets, right? It's about all of that, right? Bringing having that personal fulfillment and happiness. And I like to contrast that with probably just the some other metrics maybe that were traditionally used to define success, such as how much money do you have in the bank? What's your what's your title say outside your office door, for example, right? To me, those are all, in my opinion, foundational elements that get you to have that personal fulfillment and happiness. And I can maybe also relate. I mean, and how does that relate to career choices? I think, as Ramesh mentioned, I went to school to become a mechanical engineer, right? Because back when I was 17 or 18, I thought that would be the coolest thing to do. Uh, and my career moved through the steel industry, the aviation industry, which I thought I would love, being an aviation geek myself. But eventually found my way into not just companies and environments, but also business areas that gave me that personal fulfillment and happiness. And then, of course, look, we're all working not just for our health. We're also working for to be more comfortable in life, right? But then that was not the only pursuit, right? Be more comfortable in life gives you the room to do that, to do the things that are important to you, right? Which is things like I said, spending time with the family, making sure that you have some personal fulfillment.
Got you. Thank you. Thank you, Suresh. Ramesh, anything different than what we heard from Suresh?
Not much. I mean, I just echo that, I think the definition is fulfillment of goals. And, that's ultimately what success is. Now, goals can be big ones, it can be small ones. I mean, I finished a puzzle today. So that is a definition of success, or somebody might say that they got promoted to a role they want, which is something that they've been
Right.
working on for a long time. But also, I think success evolves. I think is a key thing, right? So, for example, from Suresh mentioned family. Now, lots of people's success is tied to their family's success, and
Right.
so look at those goals. It might be a baby's first steps. It might be that same child graduating from college later on in life, right? So,
Right.
or some
Yes.
other milestone like that. So I think those things do evolve, but I think it's one thing I will say, and is that, especially in a world where I was going to say Facebook, but it's almost like LinkedIn has become the social network for professionals, with all of its attendant, right? I mean, it's benefits, but also the
That
dysfunctionally
is
ills. But too many people do focus on career as sort of the goal, the framework by which they measure success.
correct.
And so, yeah, we do have bills to pay, and we have, rent and mortgage and groceries and all those kinds of things. But life is more than that.
Absolutely.
And so, that's something where, success is about all those things that give you fulfillment and achievement of those goals that you define.
Got you. Got you. So, what I heard from both of you obviously was you need to have goals and you need to accomplish them. These could be short term and long term goals. You talked about balance between professional and personal life, which is there, and having goals for each one of them. And could be as small as Ramesh, like you mentioned, solving a puzzle today and gives you that maybe that kick in life saying that, hey, I accomplished something over there. And the timeliness of accomplishing those goals. And one of the other things is that as we move along, and maybe let me ask you a question, then I'll make an observation on what I heard from you. Has this definition of success changed for you guys over the years? let's say when you were just fresh out of college and versus what it is today? How is it different? Ramesh, let's start with you this time.
Yeah, yeah. So that Suresh doesn't take up all the time, right? So oh, it obviously has, right? So if I look at, from the point it became an adult, there were, very sort of, I would say, you know, traditional goals, right? Goals that you have on yourself, goals that maybe you get from your parents, goals that you get from sort of the friends and families around you, are really expectations, right? Which is about, you know, graduate from college, get a job, right?
Right.
Get married, get a, build a family, those kinds of things, right? But
Right.
I think over time, for me, that has definitely changed, because I think hopefully as one gets older, one gets wiser. So a lot of it is really about, as you get past, when you're young, you're driven by some of these goals, or the measures of success,
Right. Right.
which can be sort of that, as we just said. But I think over time, you got to think about, we are all here for a finite amount of time. So what is the impact you leave? And so, maybe, when we don't exist anymore, people think about, okay, so what did this person do? And it's not going to be, whatever house they lived in, or whatever
Right.
clothes they wore. It's not going to be about that. It's going to be a lot of other things. And I think over time, as one grows older, one matures, one realizes that those are the things. And so it's the connections, it's what you do for the world that matter. So yeah, that's I think it's partly a natural evolution of everybody, right? So yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Thank you, Ramesh. Yep, Suresh, anything to add?
No, I mean, exactly the same, right? I mean, I just try to think back to, maybe when you were in college, right? I mean, the success at that point was, hey, graduate, right? And then get a job, right?
Right.
And then all the different steps that come through, when you're setting out early in your career, what is, immediate and in your face. And I think, once you get past that, establish a family, start having some kind of stability, let's say financially as well, right? Then, and then, like Ramesh said, things change, right? You start thinking about, what is the impact you're having, right? On not
Right.
just on your company and your family, right? And I think, and each one will define those differently, right? In terms of, and how you want to make that impact. I think Ramesh said, what are you going to be remembered for, right? After you're no longer here. To me, I think that's the part, right? I mean, if you've made a positive impact, right, and in whichever area or sphere that you think is important, whether you, for it's volunteering, it's mentoring. I think so many of us have done that, right?
Right.
Make sure that all your experiences in life have been passed on outside of your immediate, close circle, right? People who maybe have not had the exposure
Right.
to the kind of things that helped propel our careers in a particular direction, right? How do you go out and help them, right? Those are things I feel like become important measures of success once we grow. Evolve in our career, right? And I think the other part of it, I think, is also about a lot of us feel like, is we did our learning when we were in college, we were done with that, then we started drinking from the fire hose when we started working at early jobs, and then
Right.
later on in life, there's come some point in time, Ajay, I don't know what point it was for you or what point it was for Ramesh, but there's some point in time where you're now it's the intake and outlet kind of equation, right? You're taking on a lot early on in your career, and you're trying to turn that into something useful. At some point in time, the equation shifts, right?
Right.
And at that point in time, there's more outflow going on, right, based on where you are in your career,
Right.
than inflow, right? But then, does that mean that your growth and learning stops there? And I think a lot of do we take your foot off the pedal at that point? uh, you know so those are things, I mean, but then now, what are those new skills or new areas that or concepts that you want to start developing, right? New knowledge, new abilities, right? And that's a very personal kind of journey for
Everyone.
everyone, right? But
Right.
I think that's where I think most of us would pivot, right, and say that's a new area, right? Going back to learning about the new things that we probably did not have the time or the inclination to go out and do.
Very nice. Very nice. Actually, few points from my perspective, whatever I heard from you guys. One was, and see, when I talk to the Generation Z and the kids, and I was reading certain articles also about them, their viewpoint is very different than possibly our viewpoint when we were their age in terms of how do they define success. And interestingly, I'm so encouraged by seeing and by interaction with a lot of folks. They've started talking about a concept of apart from financial independence, the healthy balance between work and life with a purpose, impact. They're also even fairly concerned about the ethics of the organization, including their own employees in the ecosystem. There have been umpteenth examples where teenagers, just because they heard a comment from a certain organization, it could be any viewpoint which was there, and they said, no, we don't. They went across to boycott that. So there is a very raised awareness in the younger kids about how to look at success and how they want to approach life, which is very encouraging. I believe you guys would agree with that as well. And the second element was something, I'll go back to my previous comment where I said I had an observation. And actually, before I could make that comment, both of you touched on that. See, for me, the simplest definition I've ever come across in life about success has been saying that how many lives are better off because you lived. And that's where you came and talk about the impact part. Ramesh, you started, and Suresh, you built. And I love the way you said the equation shift of inflow versus outflow as you move along. You've been intaking more in the beginning, and then are you able to, while you're continuously learning as well, it doesn't mean your learning stops, but are you able to impart more impact for others around you? So fantastic. Okay, I think this is a good segue to move into the next part. We all talk about these, and so it's good to have these discussions, good to say that, hey, personal life balance and everything which is there, but you've been working with startups, you've been working the corporate life. How easy to making that work life integration, which is
I would say it was much harder the beginning of the career of at least I speak for myself, much harder in the beginning, right?
Mhm.
I think, as you know, I mean, with all of us, there was almost a single-minded, kind of outlook to life, right? Which is the career and what was needed for it, came first, right? And going out there, and whether was being on the road, I think, as all three of us have been, right? Day in, day out, week in, week out, right?
Right.
Spending life, on planes, working late, working on the weekends, right? I mean, that was how, I guess, was the mindset, right, for all of us. And
Correct.
when you mention how things are different now, where the newer generations, at least, don't feel that pressure to go out there and do that. I think it was harder in the at least I would say in the beginning, early part of my career, at least. But then at some point in time, you've got to take a conscious decision to say, it's really all about organizing or prioritizing your life, right? And it doesn't mean that you've got to just drop your career in order to achieve that balance. It means that there is a balance to be found, right? That's really what it means. So I know I believe that it's hard for sure. Sometimes, at least, maybe folks of our generation and where we came from and so on, it was harder to do, but it was possible, right? I think, me personally, I think the first maybe one third of my career was it was impossible to consider achieving that kind of balance, and then it had to be forced,
Got
and
you.
now it's become much easier. Yeah.
Got you. Got you. Ramesh, before I turn this over to you, two elements which, whatever Suresh said, I'll request you to maybe try to build upon that, right? So it is said that balance is a myth, integration is the art of showing up fully wherever you are. So when you're at work, sometimes you're thinking about your personal thing. Hey, I had to take care of. Or majority times, it's the other way around. Also, when you're with your family or with your friends and everything, and work is still, and suddenly you'll try to escape yourself to send that important email or make that phone call, whatever might be the scenario, get into a conference call. So that's one element as to how do you see that played for you. Second is a dichotomy. When Suresh was talking, saying that when he moved across his career, initially it was difficult for him, and later it was easier. And sometimes I heard people say the reverse. When they have more responsibilities, they have more accountability, it becomes difficult for them to find that balance, and their balance gets shifted in the wrong direction latter part of the career. So I'd like you to comment on both these points.
Yeah, Ajay, I was about to say that, and I was saying, you must be a mind reader. So, definitely, what came to mind when Suresh was talking was that it's about, I like the way you put it about integration, right? But for me, it's about it's finding the boundary,
Hmm.
and maybe less so about the balance. So an anecdote comes to mind. So I was really looking forward to this vacation. We were actually in Cancun. Uh,
Uh-huh.
my room had this wonderful view of the ocean, and
And how long back was this? Sorry to interrupt.
this
How
was
long?
this was probably 15 years ago.
15 years.
About
Okay.
15 years ago.
Okay.
My children were fairly small. They were, but I could see through my window. I could see them on the beach, having a lovely time. And what was I doing? I was sitting in my room and participating in a 4-hour workshop that morning. Right now, of course, it happened the next 3 days too. But the thing is, I think it's really that your point about integration, right?
All right.
That doesn't mean that because of that we have to stay home. It doesn't mean that because of that the family can't have a good time on the beach, right? Or that I can't, after 4 hours, go out there myself, right? So it's about what is that boundary? How do you live within those boundaries and make it work? It's ultimately about making it work. And you bring up a really important point about being in the moment and being intentional about what you're doing.
Right.
Um, so, to your point, I'm not sitting there in the workshop thinking, I wish I was out there on the beach, right? Equally, I'm not sitting on the beach thinking, I've got to send these emails, or what am I going to respond to that? I'm not doing that. So, once you're on either side of the boundary, stay in that side of the boundary, and
Hmm.
and do what you have to do with that intentionality. So, one of the points that I think I'd also like to raise is that it becomes tremendously easy to do all this and to find balances if you actually have the passion in what you're doing, right? I still remember, I can't remember who said it. I read it somewhere, which said that if you enjoy your job, you will never do a days of work, right?
Exactly.
So if you enjoy it, enjoy that 4 hours of being in the workshop, shut the laptop, cross the boundary, go to the beach, and then be in that with I think that has a lot more impact than people who are you know trying to reserve time and don't do a good job of being mindful in the moment and actually enjoying it without half their brain thinking about something they have to do for work.
Ramesh, what you said right now, actually, while it is very impactful, it also opens up a Pandora box. And the Pandora box could be around. You talked about passion. If you have passion, then the work doesn't feel like work for you, right? But in that case, if that 4 hour workshop would have been 8 hour workshop for you, you would have still been okay to do that, right? And you would have loved doing because you're so passionate about it.
Yes.
Then, and you are also saying you had an interesting point saying that the boundaries building, it doesn't mean that your family cannot have a good time without you, and vice versa, which is there while you're on a personal break. This could sometimes be a double-edged sword. So I don't know if there is a way to interpret this, and as
Yes.
the audience is listening to this, if they need more color and dimensions to this angle, love to hear
Well,
both Suresh and Ramesh add to
yeah.
this.
Let me quickly address that. So I'm making the assumption you enjoying being on the beach with your family too, right? So it's not just about extending this by 8 hours, but maybe extending that also by 8 hours, right? So that's where the boundary setting, because if because it comes back to, I think Suresh mentioned prioritization. So everything that ideally everything that you do are things that you really enjoy doing, and then
Right.
it's a matter of prioritizing,
Correct.
setting those boundaries, and saying, I will spend so much time on this, and I'll spend so much time on that, and I'll spend so much time on this. One cannot be single dimensional. So life is not single dimensional. So,
I get that. I get that.
Yeah.
I have an observation, but Suresh, anything else you want to add to this topic, which is
No,
there?
I echo completely. I mean, the question is, if you're going to be spending 8 hours a day in a hotel room, why pay all the money to go to Cancun and do that, right? But yeah, but yeah, I know, I completely agree. I think it's a question of setting those boundaries and staying
Agree.
within it, and making sure that one boundary doesn't, those boundaries don't, kind of impinge into the other, right? Just completely go on and take over the space of the other. Either way, right? Which you likes just sitting on the beach, that's fine, right? But if
Right.
there's fires that need to be put out, and it's not going to wait for you to come back from the beach to do it, right? That's where I think the boundary, having that equilibrium is important.
Right, right, right. No, but Ramesh, in case it makes you feel better, we've all been there, done that, right? So we've all done where situations have come across on prioritization, to your point, between professional and personal things. Sometimes personal, majority of times actually, personal had taken a beating, which is there.
Yeah.
And so we've been there, done that. And I could quote so many anecdotes from my personal life as well, where I've done things which are so crazy enough when I think back and I laugh at it right now. Why did I do like that? Which is there, but that was the time. That was the decision we made as individuals, and we felt what is right. We have to do, and we went ahead with that. And it does become difficult as times. And so, any color and dimension of the second point which I mentioned, which I highlighted from Suresh's point about as your experience grows, does your ability to find that balance increases or decreases?
I think I've found that it has decreased, right? I mean, the challenge of finding that time. I think I've as time has gone on, as I think I've evolved, and sort of gained more experience, not only in work but in sort of broader life. I'm actually finding it easier to set those boundaries, um, be able to look at work plus other things. Yes, the responsibilities always increase, um, but I've found it easier, and perhaps maybe it's easier because um, it's no longer a binary choice between
Hmm.
work and everything else. It is work and family. It could be other things, the interests that you've got, and so on. So now it's a varied decision, and so
Right.
balancing those could get a little bit harder because you're now prioritizing multiple things. But simply a sort of the work life versus everything else life certainly has become easier.
Right, right. We'll drop this topic, subtopic for a moment because this discussion itself can take an hour and we can keep on this topic itself. But what I heard from both of you, and I'm just reconfirming that, what I heard from both of you, that pursuing both your personal fulfillment as well as career ambitions simultaneously is possible. Would that be fair to say? And
Absolutely.
um, some of the attributes which you're mentioning across setting up the boundaries, etc., and prioritizing, and these things may vary when you're fresh into the job and starting your professional career in a startup ecosystem, or maybe somewhere when you're down the line, a couple of decades under your belt and stuff like that. Things might change across, and you can monitor things. But that's possible. So that's good to hear, which is there. Is there anything you'd like to share? If there were two, three pointers from your perspective saying that, hey, you want to tell your younger self, go back to your early part of career and saying that Suresh and Ramesh, you have an opportunity to tell your younger self at that time, two, three things you could have done differently as a learning, what you've seen across a couple of decades of experience, what those couple of things might be.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think I'd go back and say, I think a lot of the stress and the the second guessing in terms of are you doing the right thing? Is this going to work out? And should it have been this approach versus that approach? All those kinds of choices, dilemmas, that you have as you are working your way immediately after college, so through to the first 5, 6, 7 years of your early part of your career.
Hmm.
My if I had to look back, and I would say, uh, you know, to go with the flow, right? I mean, life has a purpose for you, right? And you're going to get there, and enjoy the ride a little more, rather than flail, and because you, as much as you flail, right, you're not really going to be able to swim upstream, right? The current is that strong. The current, that current is going to take you somewhere, right? And It's a question of, are you going to have fun while you're doing it, or or are you going to give yourself a hard time? To me, that is the number one less. If I could go back, that's what I would say.
Oh, no, very interesting, very interesting. And Ramesh, what you have to say in terms of, you can definitely put your pointers, but I would also request you to touch base on the last part, which Suresh said, right? Enjoy the ride. And you're telling this to your younger self, but if you're telling this to a younger person today, and the person will say, you know what, I'm just getting started. When you started your career, you went all out, you did your conference calls, which were there, and family enjoying the beach. How can you tell me that? If there is any twist to that, feel free to add.
Yeah, no, I think there's a reason why we say hindsight is 2020, right? But when you're, I will say that there's when you're in that position as a younger self, the one thing you do not have is the benefit of experience.
Right.
And what does the benefit of experience, tell me now? It tells me that, these are choices that you're making, very deliberately, right? And these are choices in terms of, what you want to pursue, what are the goals that are of higher priority, and that isn't necessarily wrong, right? So these are just choices that you're making at that point of time, because those are important for you, and that will change in the future. So I'll echo what Suresh said, which is, enjoy it at that moment,
Right.
because that's what it's about. But I think, I have been fortunate in that, I did the things that I like, right? Especially when it comes to work. But equally, I have worked with a number of people, have number of friends and acquaintances who perhaps weren't in those same sorts of situations. So
Mhm.
what, I cannot think of anything worse than doing something you don't enjoy, and prioritizing that activity over everything else in your life. So that's the advice I give others that I've been fortunate to actually have avoided, maybe not deliberately, but certainly avoided. So that's, I think, a key piece of advice I would give. The other advice I would give also is that, you know, um, it's hard to go back and say that now, but certainly lots of other interests, and especially when it comes to things like hobbies or other activities outside that, I would have said, that's a one piece of advice I'd go back and tell sort of, the 20, 30-year-old, Ramesh is, you know, if you can set some time apart to do these things. So I'll give you an example. So both Suresh and I actually used to play the guitar when we were in high
Yeah.
school, and I don't believe either of us touched it after that. After we left school, my son started playing when he was about 7 or 8 years old, and he was struggling with some lessons, and so I finally said, "Let me teach you the song." And surprisingly, I still remembered it. That got me back into it, and so that is one piece where you think, I'm enjoying doing that. I've taken that up. I'm probably not as good a guitar player as you are as a singer, but 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 having said that, I think that's one of the things where, I say, I know I made the decisions, and they were in due to the right reasons at the time. But looking back, have a little fun on the way. Um, you know,
Right. Right.
maybe
Enjoy the ride.
maybe
Have
we
fun.
could
Yeah.
have played some guitar in my 20s and my 30s, right? So
So this time you actually proved to be the mind reader, Ramesh. When you started talking about hobbies, I was about to say bring up your guitar playing before both of you, and you brought it up on your own. Okay, fantastic. Uh, Good time to actually. My next question, which I was thinking in my mind was, see, it says that if your cup is empty, you cannot pour into anyone else's. And in for that, a concept of self-care is not being selfish. It's actually survival. To your point, you were talking about hobbies being there, because then you are able to let the creative juices or whatever hobbies, passions you have, and you kind of have a full kind of a 360-degree kind of a ecosystem for yourself, where you can actually go across and do things and not be just looking at the professional side of work, which is there. So, role of self-care, emotional well-being being part of it. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I'd say, that's one of the reasons why I brought up the music thing, because
Right.
those kinds of hobbies are, I think, essential to sort of, first of all, prevent burnout, right? There are things that, as much as you might enjoy what you're doing at work, um, spending time and actually getting fulfillment from doing things that are outside of work make you better as a human being, make you better at everything else that you do. So I would definitely say that those kinds of things are very important, and doing those things that you enjoy. It could be, gardening, it could be music, it could be traveling, could be whatever one does, but that provides, I think, that sort of, I don't want to say balance, but it's actually, all of these things have to come together, right? It's kind of, uh, it's like cooking, which is another hobby that I've taken up, and luckily I'm the one who gets to eat it, and then don't have to inflict it on others. But it's like, all the ingredients, right? You might be making something which has a primary ingredient, but you need a lot of other things to make it all come together. So a single note dish is not very appetizing, and a single note sort of mentality is not very fulfilling either.
Got you. No, this is good stuff. I have a next question, but Suresh, if you want to add anything to this, otherwise I'll put the next new question to you directly.
Yeah, let's go to the next one. Yeah. Yeah.
So the other thing which is there is, see what happens. I've heard it. I think I'm trying to recall where was this, but there is a saying which says, "Fall 7 times, rise 8, but rise wiser."
Hmm.
And basically, it's all about resilience in life. Setbacks, we all go through our ups and downs, which are there. And the key thing is, how do you handle that? So anything, any uplifting kind of story which you would have personally been, and how did you come back, and which might be a learning for the audience, and Suresh and Ramesh, both of you. But Suresh, we'll start with you first.
Yeah, I mean, there's this these kinds of knocks happen. I mean, if you've gone even some short period of time in your career without having some kind of a setback, whether that's business or from a career perspective, right? I mean, I don't think anyone has really been working or been in a career if that has not happened,
Correct.
right? So it's part and parcel of life, right? I mean, whether it is I mean, I could say things like. You've put your passion behind, since I've, worked in trying to build products and take them to market. That's, probably it's happened so many times that you don't always hit it out of the park, right? I mean, you have a product that's either too early for its time. Had that happen a couple of times. I remember the first time it happened to me, where a lot of hope, a lot of let's say ambitions from not just the myself, but probably most of the business were that that this would go off and be a real hit right out of the box. But in that particular case, we were a little too early for the market, right? So all that hard work, all the investment, it doesn't seem to pay out in the first few months. And it was easy to have maybe given up hope and said this is not it. But then to have that mindset that says, let's all just dust ourselves off, get back here and see what we need to do, right? Pare this thing down to what was acceptable to the market today, or and give ourselves that lead time when we know if we have such strong conviction that this is where this is a product that can excel, right? Wait for the market to come to you, right? But the intervening period is pretty hard, right? And this has happened, not once, but quite a few times. Different parts of the business, whether it is trying to make, as you grow from managing a product to managing a business, then it's something, Ajay, probably you're very familiar with, meeting your quarterly targets, your annual targets, right? You
Tell
don't
me
hit
about
them,
it.
right? What do you do, right? You go back and make sure that the next quarter, the next year, you claw all that back, and you go and excel. So
Right.
it's without that mindset, I just feel not just in your work life or your career, or trying to run businesses or products, or keep customers happy and so on. This is part of life, right? I mean, life throws outside of work all these kinds of roadblocks, if you will. But if you don't have the resilience to bounce back and say, I've learned from this. The next time around, you make sure you time your product to market perfectly, yeah, right, and so on. And next time, you make sure you hit your quota, right, for the quarter or for the year. So yeah, it's I think. And if you don't learn from these, right? If you don't learn from those, and you keep making those same mistakes over and over again,
Right.
so that to me is critical. I'm sure Ramesh has a few as well, but
Yeah. So rise but wiser. So
yeah, rise or rise.
absolutely fantastic. Ramesh, anything from your side you like to share?
So just touching upon some of the resilience, but I remember reading a book. Unfortunately, I can't remember the name, but maybe we'll find it and post it, which is really about grit, right? Which is about the resilience. It's about the attention to getting something done despite all the setbacks and so on. And the book I read, I think that the research showed that grit is the single biggest predictor of success, more than anything else. So of course, I think if you couple, the passion, which is the interest in actually doing it, and then
Right.
and then if you apply your certain determination to say, despite the setbacks, I will complete it. There's um, Success is guaranteed. So,
Yeah. I wish there was a formula like that for sure. On a lighter note, one of my friends actually, because I've also charted this new path, right? So somebody is talking about, Ajay, you're talking about all this concept about beyond success. I still need to taste success. I'll talk about beyond success only after that. I said, all right, that's a valid point. But Ramesh and Suresh, I think we are top of the hour. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversations. But before we close for it, any closing comments from both of you?
No, I think what I would say is, Ajay, I mean, going back to what you've done so eloquently in your book, right? It's all about the definition of success, personal fulfillment, right? I mean, it's what you want to get, and maybe that's. I hope you followed up that comment that was made by your friend by saying, if you haven't achieved success yet, have you defined what your success metrics are, right? And if I think if that person did that, I think, as you've written about in quite a few places, but that person might say, maybe their goals were either not right, or maybe they've already achieved those goals, right? And what are you searching for at that point, right? But no, I think it's to me, that phrase, and you've used it very well in your book, is the personal fulfillment really matters when it comes to the definition of success.
Thank you. Thank you,
yeah.
sir. Ramesh, anything else to add?
Not much more other than to say that success is what you define, right? Um, don't let other people define what your success means, because it'll be their success and not yours. So make it yours. Do what you have to. And to your point earlier, I think the younger generation seems to have a better sense of that, which is great for the future of the world. But I think that's very important. So just make it yours. It's your definition.
Correct, correct. And Ramesh, to your point, I recall when all of us were growing up, right? I think which career we want to take was never decided by us, actually, right? Majority time it was the ecosystem we had, it right from parents, teachers,
Yeah.
friends, Why did I take up maths in my school days? Because all my friends were taking, and I was okay at studies. So let's go for maths. I do the engineering, whatever it is. So I hear you loud and clear. And that's a good kind of learning nugget which you're leaving for everyone. Define your own success. Don't get influenced by others defining success for you. Fantastic. Okay, with this note, I think we'll bring our session for today to an end. But Suresh and Ramesh, thank you. Really, really. I thoroughly enjoyed, like I mentioned earlier, and I'm sure audience who's going to listen and watch this podcast will have a lot of nuggets to learn as well. So thank you once again, and have a good one.
Yeah, thank you, Ajay.
Thanks, Ajay. You too.
Yeah, thank you.